The Gamelin warship infiltrator locked onto the human cruiser Defiant, expecting a routine scan. What splashed across their monitors wasn't a list of weapon schematics or troop deployments, but a detailed analysis of the Defiant's crew. And the psychological profiles left the Gamelin bridge crew speechless. The data streamed across the infiltrator's main viewscreen, a chaotic tapestry of interconnected nodes and branching pathways, each representing a different member of the Defiant's crew. Emotional volatility indexes spiked erratically, personality matrices displayed conflicting traits, and cognitive response patterns seemed almost random. One profile, belonging to a Lieutenant Jensen, showed a predilection for absurdist humor bordering on the delusional, coupled with an unwavering dedication to his fellow crewmates. Another, a Sergeant Vasquez, displayed a deep-seated distrust of authority figures alongside an almost reckless bravery in combat. Silence hung heavy on the bridge. Commander Rixus, his carapace gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights, stared at the screen with growing unease. He tapped a clawed finger against the armrest of his command chair. "Explain," he rasped, his voice a low, guttural rumble. Science Officer Drell, his antennae twitching nervously, stammered, "Commander, the scan. It appears to be a comprehensive psychological assessment of the Defiant's crew. The data is unconventional." Rixus's multiple eyes narrowed. "Unconventional, elaborate." "The profiles are inconsistent, Commander, contradictory. There's a distinct lack of uniformity. It's as if each individual is operating under their own set of rules." Drell paused, then added almost apologetically, "It does not conform to standard combat doctrine, sir." Rixus snorted, a puff of air venting from his mandibles. "Flawed data. Human technology is notoriously unreliable. Disregard the psychological profiles. I want tactical readouts, weapon systems, shield configuration, troop deployment. Focus on what matters." He waved a dismissive claw. "This emotional drivel is irrelevant." But at one of the science consoles, Estelle, a junior science officer with a sharp intellect and an even sharper curiosity, surreptitiously saved the psychological profiles to a secure data chip. The chaotic mess of the human minds intrigued her, a stark contrast to the rigidly structured Gamelin society she knew. There had to be something of value here. Meanwhile, light years away, aboard the Defiant, Tyler Carter sat across from a young ensign in his cramped, dimly lit office. The ensign, barely out of his teens, fidgeted in his seat, his eyes red-rimmed. I can't shake it, Doc," he mumbled, his voice cracking. "The screaming, the explosions, I keep seeing their faces." Tyler, a man in his late 30s with a perpetually tired look and a wry smile, leaned forward, his voice soft and reassuring. "It's okay, kid. It's normal to feel that way after what you've been through. War isn't easy on anyone, especially not someone with a good heart." He paused, then added with a gentle grin, "Besides, who needs sleep when you can have existential dread keeping you company, right?" The ensign managed a weak smile. "I guess. Look, Ensign Miller, right? Ensign Miller, what you're feeling is called combat stress. It's your brain's way of processing trauma. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign that you're human." Tyler reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a stress ball shaped like a miniature warship. "Here, take this. Squeeze the hell out of it whenever you feel overwhelmed. Imagine it's the Gamelin flagship." A chime sounded from Tyler's comm unit. "Carter to the bridge," a voice crackled. "Report immediately." Tyler sighed. "Duty calls. We'll continue this later, Ensign." "Remember what we talked about." He clapped the ensign on the shoulder and headed towards the door. On the bridge, Captain Eva Rostova, a stern woman with steely gray eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, addressed Tyler. "Dr. Carter, we have a situation. The Gamelins scanned us. Standard procedure, but their analysis came back. Peculiar." "Peculiar, ma'am?" Tyler raised an eyebrow. "They didn't get weapon schematics or troop deployments, Doctor. They got us, our psychological profiles, every neurosis, every fear, every..." quirk. Rostova's face was grim. They know what makes us tick, Doctor, our strengths, our weaknesses. They know how to exploit us. Tyler chuckled softly, a sound that seemed to surprise even him. With all due respect, Captain, I wouldn't worry too much. The Gamilons are notoriously rigid. Their society is built on conformity and obedience. They wouldn't know what to make of human psychology even if it slapped them in the face. They'll probably think we're all clinically insane. Back on the infiltrator, Estelle stared intently at the saved psychological profiles, a frown creasing her brow. The contradictions bothered her. One profile indicated a deep-seated fear of death, yet the same individual had charged headfirst into a hail of enemy fire during a recent skirmish. Another profile showed a strong aversion to violence, yet the individual had racked up an impressive kill count. She cross-referenced the profiles with combat logs, analyzing the Defiance crew's actions during battle. She noticed a pattern: unconventional tactics, unexpected maneuvers, and a willingness to take risks that would be considered suicidal by Gamilon standards. They seemed to improvise, to adapt, to think outside the box. The more she studied the data, the more Estelle became convinced that human individuality wasn't a weakness but a strength that the rigidly structured Gamilon society could never comprehend. The very thought was almost heretical. Suddenly, a stern voice cut through her thoughts. "Estelle, what are you doing?" Commander Vorak, Estelle's superior officer, stood behind her, his eyes narrowed. "I warned you to focus on your primary duties. What is the meaning of this?" He gestured towards the screen displaying the human psychological profiles. Estelle straightened, her heart pounding in her chest. "Commander, I believe this data warrants further investigation. The human crew exhibits unique characteristics that could be exploited." Vorak snorted. "Exploited? They're undisciplined, emotional creatures. They're weak. Now delete this data and return to your assigned task. That is an order." Defiance flickered in Estelle's eyes, but she quickly suppressed it. "Yes, Commander." She knew she couldn't openly defy him, not yet, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The human profiles held a key, she was sure of it. Driven by a desperate need to understand what she had seen, Estelle initiated a clandestine communication sequence, targeting the Defiant. She had to understand, even if it meant risking everything. Estelle slid into the low-priority comm station, the cold metal of the seat sending a shiver through her spine despite the insulated uniform. The air hummed with the low thrum of the infiltrator's engines, a constant vibration against her bones. Her fingers danced across the console, rerouting channels, masking her signal. Each keystroke was a calculated risk, a whisper against the roar of Gamilon internal security. Perspiration beaded on her forehead as she bypassed the final firewall. A breath, held too long, escaped her lips. She initiated the brief coded transmission. Subjective resilience, combat scenario, psychological variance. The message was a bare skeleton stripped of any identifying markers, a question posed in the language of data. On the Defiant, the comms officer, Lieutenant Park, frowned at the console. "Captain, we've got an unusual signal. Low priority, heavily encrypted, originating from somewhere within Gamilon space." A string of red alerts flashed across the screen. Possible hostile probe. Captain Eva Rostova's teeth gritted. "Decryption attempt, Lieutenant, and get me Dr. Carter. This smells like a trap." In his cramped office, surrounded by stacks of datapads and half-empty mugs of synth coffee, Tyler Carter ran a diagnostic on the decrypted message. The symbols swam before his eyes, a jumble of alien characters. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes. "Sophisticated encryption, Captain, almost. Archaic. I'm seeing patterns reminiscent of pre-war human psychological assessment techniques." He paused, tapping his chin. "Odd. A Gamilon history lesson isn't what I need, Doctor." Rostova's voice crackled over the comm. "Is it a threat?" Tyler hesitated. "Potentially, but I don't think so. I think it's a question, a very carefully worded question." He took a breath. I propose a limited, indirect response. We probe their intentions without revealing anything sensitive, a carefully constructed ambiguity. Back on the infiltrator, Estelle received the Defiant's reply. The Gamelin characters flowed across the screen, a tapestry of calculated nuance. She recognized the subtle application of advanced behavioral psychology principles, the careful avoidance of direct answers. Relief washed over her, quickly replaced by a renewed sense of urgency. She initiated another transmission, this time pushing the boundaries. Correlation, individual trauma, unit cohesion. Significance threshold. The risk of detection spiked with each additional word. Her heart hammered against her ribs. On the Defiant, Tyler stared at the latest message, his brow furrowed. This is deeper than I thought, Captain. They're not just fishing for tactical data. They're genuinely trying to understand something about the human psyche. About trauma, about its impact on group dynamics. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. He remembered a past mission, a hostage situation gone wrong. His misjudgment, his failure to anticipate the enemy's actions had cost lives. Flashback. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning metal. Alarms blared, a deafening cacophony. Screams echoed through the corridor. Tyler stood frozen, his face pale, as a superior officer screamed, "Carter, what the hell are you doing? They're executing the hostages." The image of a young ensign, eyes wide with terror, flashed before him. Then darkness. Back in the present, Tyler shook his head, trying to clear the memory. He couldn't let past failures cloud his judgment. He had to trust his instincts. "Captain, I recommend we share a declassified, anonymized case study. Something that demonstrates human adaptability in the face of extreme stress. Nothing sensitive, but enough to show them what we're capable of." Estelle devoured the case study, her eyes scanning the alien text. She saw the subject's trauma laid bare, the raw emotions, the struggle for survival. But she also saw something else: resilience, adaptability, the capacity for emotional processing, not as a weakness but as a source of strength. A concept utterly foreign to Gamelin doctrine. In the Infiltrator's command center, Sub-Commander Rail watched the chronometer with growing suspicion. Science Officer Ilara is exceeding her allotted research time by 37%. Her data requests are unusual. He turned to a junior officer. "Monitor her activities. I want a full report." Estelle felt the shift in the air, the subtle tightening of the noose. She knew she was being watched. She worked quickly, compiling her analysis of the human psychological profiles into a secure data packet. She had to get this information off the Infiltrator somehow. On the Defiant, Tyler was hunched over his console, drafting a comprehensive report for the captain. The Gamelin's rigid mindset, their fear of individuality, makes them predictable. If we can understand their psychological vulnerabilities, we can anticipate their reactions and potentially exploit their weaknesses. His report emphasized the importance of understanding the Gamelin's culture, their ingrained obedience, their fear of independent thought. Their strength is also their weakness, Captain. Their rigidity makes them brittle, and brittle things break. On the Infiltrator, the junior officer approached Sub-Commander Rail. "Sir, Science Officer Ilara has been observed accessing restricted data channels and preparing a secure data packet. Her activities are highly irregular." Rail's eyes narrowed. "Seal off her lab. I want her brought in for questioning." Commander Rix's voice was a low, guttural rumble that vibrated in the small confines of Estelle's quarters. "Science Officer, explain the unauthorized communication packet detected originating from your station, and the unscheduled sensor calibration." His eyes, cold and reptilian, narrowed, the light glinting off the rigid plates of his carapace. Estelle stood erect and rigid, her hands clasped tightly behind her back, the Gamelin equivalent of parade rest. "Commander, I was investigating a potential weakness in human psychological warfare tactics. The data packet contained my analysis." Rix took a step closer, the air thick with his disapproval. Psychological warfare, without authorization. These humans are hardly subtle enough for such tactics. He gestured towards the small workstation. A full search, now. And I will require your data access codes. Two security officers, hulking figures in black armor, moved forward, their disruptor rifles held at the ready. They began a systematic search of Estelle's quarters, their movements precise and efficient, leaving no corner untouched. The violation of her personal space felt like a physical blow. Rix watched, his gaze never leaving Estelle. He took the offered access codes without a word. Later, alone in the sensor calibration room, Estelle's heart hammered against her ribs. Rix's suspicion was a tangible weight. She had to get the data to the humans. Her fingers trembled as she activated the hidden emergency beacon, a relic from a long-abandoned research project. Short range only. A desperate gamble. She uploaded the data packet, her eyes darting nervously towards the door. A sudden whine filled the small space, escalating into a high-pitched shriek. Red lights pulsed on the control panel. An energy surge overloading the beacon. A silent alarm, she realized with a sickening lurch, would already be triggered. She bolted. The corridor stretched before her, a maze of identical gray panels and flickering lights. The alarm klaxon, now audible, echoed around her. Heavy footsteps pounded behind her. She risked a glance over her shoulder. Two security officers, their disruptor rifles raised, were gaining on her. Desperation fueled her. She slammed her fist against a maintenance panel, ripping it open. A tangle of wires sparked and hissed. She ripped out a handful, shorting out the local environmental controls. A section of the ship, she hoped, would vent. A whoosh of escaping air roared behind her, followed by the screams of the pursuing guards. The sudden decompression would buy her precious moments. She sprinted towards the escape pod bay, her lungs burning, her vision blurring. The bay doors hissed open, revealing a row of small, single-person pods. She scrambled into the nearest one, sealed the hatch, and initiated the launch sequence. The pod shuddered violently as it ejected from the infiltrator, hurtling towards the cold void of space, towards the Defiant, towards an uncertain future. On the bridge of the Defiant, alarms blared. "Captain, we've detected an approaching object. Gamelin origin, escape pod signature." Lieutenant Sharma's voice was tight with apprehension. Captain Eva Rostova, her face etched with concern, barked orders. "Raise alert status. Activate tractor beam. Secure the pod but prepare for a potential boarding attempt. Or worse, a Trojan horse." The Defiant's tractor beam locked onto the escape pod, reeling it in slowly. As the pod docked with the boarding tube, the atmosphere inside was thin with suspicion. Estelle stumbled out of the pod, disoriented and clutching her side. The boarding tube was lined with armed Marines, their faces grim. She was immediately surrounded, her hands roughly cuffed behind her back. "She's injured, Captain," one of the Marines reported, his voice permeated with distrust. "Get her to a secure holding cell," Rostova ordered. "And keep a close watch. She's a Gamelin. We can't afford to take any chances." As Estelle was led away, her head swimming, she saw Tyler Carter watching her, his expression unreadable. Later in the briefing room, Tyler argued his case. "Captain, I understand the caution, but her actions suggest a possible defection. The data she tried to transmit. It could be valuable. Or it could be a trap, Doctor," Rostova countered, her voice firm. "We know very little about Gamelin psychology. This could be an elaborate deception. I'm asking for limited access, Captain, a chance to interview her. My skills could help determine her true intentions." Rostova hesitated, her gaze fixed on Tyler. "All right, Doctor, I'll grant you limited access, but proceed with extreme caution. We need to remain vigilant against Gamelin deception. And Carter," she added, her voice hardening, "if this goes south, it's on you." In the sterile confines of the holding cell, Estelle sat huddled on the narrow bunk, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. The cold metal pressed against her skin. She flinched as the door hissed open. Tyler entered, his expression calm and reassuring. He observed her body language, the way she clutched herself, the tremor in her hands. He noted her apparent distress. This wasn't the posture of a confident spy. He sat down on the edge of the bunk, maintaining a respectful distance. "Science officer," he began, his voice gentle, "I understand you took a considerable risk in contacting us. Why?" Estelle remained silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the floor. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I am frustrated with my society. With its rigid control, its oppression." A flicker of defiance sparked in her eyes. She paused, struggling to articulate her reasons. "I am beginning to question everything I thought I knew about the galaxy." Tyler adjusted the angle of the light, trying to soften the harsh glare in the small, utilitarian interrogation room. Estelle sat rigidly in the center, her gray skin appearing almost translucent under the artificial illumination. He knew, intellectually, that the universal translator was working, converting his words into Gamelin and hers into English. But something was lost, a layer of emotional nuance that was crucial to understanding her. He could hear the words, but he couldn't feel them. "Estelle," Tyler began, his voice calm and measured, "tell me why you left your ship." Estelle hesitated, her multifaceted eyes flicking nervously around the room, avoiding his gaze. Her breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. It wasn't just fear, it was something deeper, a profound struggle to articulate something she had likely never even allowed herself to think, let alone say aloud. It is difficult to explain," she finally said, her voice a low, almost mechanical monotone. "Our conditioning, it is not easily overcome." A tremor ran through her slender frame. Tyler leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Conditioning, can you elaborate?" Estelle's fingers tightened around the edge of the metal table. "From the moment of our emergence, we are taught that conformity is paramount, individuality is discouraged, it is seen as disruptive, inefficient, critical thinking is destabilizing." Her words were precise, carefully chosen, as if reciting a doctrine. "We are given our purpose, we are told our value, we do not question." Tyler nodded slowly, processing her words. He thought back to the scan data, to the chaotic jumble of human psychological profiles that had so unnerved the Gamelins. "So, when you saw our individuality, our emotional complexity, what did you think?" Estelle's gaze finally met his, and he saw a flicker of something akin to wonder. "We misinterpreted it. We saw chaos, instability. We believed it made you weak. We did not understand its potential, your capacity for creativity, your resilience." "Resilience?" Tyler echoed, intrigued. "Yes, the ability to adapt, to overcome adversity. These are not weaknesses, they are strengths we lack." Tyler felt a pang of empathy. He knew what it felt like to be stifled, misunderstood. He remembered the faces of the crewmates he couldn't save. The weight of that failure still pressed down on him. "I understand what it's like to feel trapped." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "To feel like you don't fit in." Estelle's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her features. "You understand more than you know," Tyler replied softly. "What were you hoping to find by defecting?" Estelle took a deep breath, as if gathering her courage. "Knowledge, understanding, the Gamelin Empire. It offers neither. Curiosity is suppressed, questions are discouraged. I yearned for more." Tyler studied her intently, searching for any sign of deception. Her posture, her micro-expressions, the subtle shifts in her vocal tone, they all pointed to sincerity. He genuinely believed her. He activated his calm. "Tyler," to Captain Reynolds. "Go ahead, Doctor." The captain's voice was curt, impatient. "I've been interviewing Estelle. She's providing some valuable insights into Gamelin society and their misinterpretations of human psychology. I believe she's telling the truth. Her defection seems genuine." There was a long pause. "Genuineness is not exactly a Gamelin strong suit, Doctor. They're masters of deception. I need concrete evidence, something tangible." Does she possess information that could benefit us, something that justifies the risk of harboring her? Tyler hesitated. The captain had a point. He needed to prove Estelle's worth. I'll see what I can do, Captain. As he deactivated the comm, a klaxon blared through the ship. Red alert lights flashed, bathing the interrogation room in an ominous glow. Sensors detecting an approaching vessel, a voice announced over the intercom. Gamelin patrol ship class Hunter, trajectory indicates an intercept course. Tyler's eyes widened. He looked at Estelle, a question forming in his mind. Report, the captain's voice barked over the intercom. Gamelin patrol ship is closing rapidly, Captain, the helmsman replied. They've identified our vessel. They're hailing us. Ignore them, the captain ordered. Evasive maneuvers, I want us out of here, now. Estelle flinched at the captain's tone. She knew what a Hunter-class patrol ship was capable of. Tyler turned to Estelle. Can you tell me anything about this ship, weaknesses, blind spots? Estelle, hearing the captain's orders, spoke quickly. The Hunter class has limited sensor range in dense asteroid fields, and its turning radius is poor because of the placement of the thrusters. Tyler activated his comm again. Tyler to Captain Reynolds. Estelle has tactical information about the Gamelin ship. She says they have limited sensor range in asteroid fields and a poor turning radius. And why should I trust her, Doctor? The captain snapped back. Because if we don't, we're likely going to be space dust, Captain, Tyler countered. It's a risk, but it's a risk worth taking. The captain hesitated, then sighed. Helmsman, adjust our course. Take us into the Kepler asteroid field. Follow the Gamelin defectors. Recommendations. The Defiant lurched violently as the helmsman initiated the evasive maneuvers. Alarms wailed as the ship plunged into the dense asteroid field. Rocks of varying sizes hurtled past the viewport, some narrowly missing the hull. Report, the captain demanded, her voice tight with tension. We're in the asteroid field, Captain, the helmsman replied. Visibility is minimal. The Gamelin ship is still pursuing us, but they're having trouble navigating the field. Tyler watched Estelle, her face etched with a mixture of fear and persistence. He could see the knowledge in her eyes, the intimate understanding of the Gamelin ship that could be their salvation. Adjust course 3 degrees to starboard, Estelle instructed, her voice surprisingly calm. Then, initiate a short burst of speed. It will create a sensor blind spot. The helmsman followed her instructions. The Defiant shuddered as it executed the maneuver. Report, the captain repeated, her voice barely audible above the din. The Gamelin ship is losing us, Captain, the helmsman announced. They've lost sensor lock. We've evaded them. A collective sigh of relief swept through the bridge. The captain turned to Tyler, a grudging respect in her eyes. All right, Doctor, she said. It seems your defector may be more valuable than I initially thought. Get as much intelligence out of her as you can. I want to know everything about the Gamelins, their technology, their society, their weaknesses, everything. As Tyler nodded, a chilling message flashed across the Defiant's comm screen. Incoming priority transmission GAMILON High Command. Unbeknownst to the Defiant crew, Commander Rix, livid over Estelle's defection and the failed pursuit, had already issued orders for a full-scale retrieval operation. He would silence Estelle permanently at any expense. The sensor array, Tyler pressed, his voice calm but insistent. Is there a particular blind spot, a weakness in their coverage we could exploit? Estelle hesitated, her fingers tracing patterns on the metal table. There is. A node aft section near the impulse drives. It's shielded, ostensibly to protect against engine interference, but the shielding also creates a localized dead zone. Small, but significant. A schematic of the infiltrator shimmered into existence above the table, projected from Tyler's wrist-mounted device. Estelle pointed to a section highlighted in crimson. The image was incredibly detailed, showing the layering of armor plating, the conduits for coolant, even the minute vibrations of the engines. She'd essentially handed them a blueprint to their enemy. The shielding bleeds off a percentage of sensor energy, creating a shadow. It's a calculated risk on their part, minimal interference, minimal sensor loss, but a skilled pilot could use it to their advantage. Tyler tapped a command into his device, cross-referencing the schematic with existing intelligence data on Gamelin ship designs. Lines of code scrolled across the display, comparing and contrasting the information. The data matches. This confirms several independent reports about sensor anomalies on infiltrator-class vessels. He looked up, a flicker of respect in his eyes. Good, very good. Their boarding tactics, Tyler continued, leaning forward. Walk me through a typical assault. Estelle closed her eyes for a moment, seemingly visualizing the scenario. They rely on speed and overwhelming force. Shock troops heavily armored, equipped with plasma rifles and disruptor grenades. They target key systems: the bridge, engineering, life support. Their primary goal is to disable the ship and capture the crew. She paused, a hint of distaste in her voice. They are efficient but predictable. Predictable how? They favor direct assaults, breaching the hull in multiple locations simultaneously. They expect minimal resistance, relying on the element of surprise, but they are vulnerable to creative countermeasures, traps, ambushes, anything that disrupts their momentum. Tyler nodded, absorbing the information. He knew exactly who to relay this to. He clipped his device back onto his wrist and stood up. Thank you, Estelle. This is invaluable. He found Captain Eva Rostova on the bridge, her brow furrowed as she studied a holographic display of the surrounding star system. The tactical officer, Lieutenant Williams, stood beside her, muttering about probability vectors and engagement envelopes. Captain, Tyler began, approaching the command chair. I have an update from Estelle regarding Gamelin ship designs and boarding tactics. Rostova turned, her expression hardening slightly. And the information is accurate, Captain. I've verified it against existing intelligence. Estelle has provided detailed schematics of the infiltrator, highlighting its strengths and weaknesses. She also described their boarding tactics, their reliance on shock troops, and their vulnerability to traps and ambushes. Rostova listened intently, her eyes narrowing as Tyler spoke. When he finished, she turned to Williams. Lieutenant, run a combat simulation based on this new data. I want to know the optimal defensive strategy, given the infiltrator's capabilities and vulnerabilities. Williams nodded, his fingers flying across the tactical console. Aye, Captain, simulating now. A few minutes later, Williams turned back to Rostova, his expression grim. The infiltrator is a formidable opponent, Captain, but Estelle's information has revealed several key vulnerabilities. We can exploit their sensor blind spots and their predictable boarding tactics. I recommend we modify the ship's internal layout, creating traps and ambushes in key choke points. Rostova considered the information, her gaze sweeping across the bridge crew. Do it. Modify the ship. Prepare for a boarding action. And Williams, she added, turning back to the tactical officer, a hint of steel in her voice. I want those simulations to be perfect. I want to know every possible scenario, every possible outcome. She turned to Tyler, her expression softening slightly. Doctor, tell Estelle that her insights are proving invaluable. Her assistance may very well save lives today. Tyler nodded, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over him. He returned to Estelle, finding her staring out the viewport at the swirling nebula outside. The captain is impressed, Tyler said, approaching her. She values your insights. She said your assistance may save lives today. Estelle turned, her expression unreadable. I only want to help. I know, Tyler said softly, and you are more than you realize. He left her to her thoughts and sought out the Defiance engineering team. The chief engineer, a gruff, pragmatic woman named Ramirez, was already barking orders at her crew, directing them to reroute power conduits and reinforce bulkheads. Ramirez, Tyler said, approaching her. Estelle revealed a key weakness in the Gamelin communication network. Apparently, their command and control systems are vulnerable to electronic jamming. Is there anything we can do to exploit this? Ramirez paused, her eyes narrowing in thought. Jamming their comms, huh? That's interesting. We could rig up a countermeasure, a device that scrambles their frequencies and disrupts their coordination. It'll take some time, but it's doable. Do it, Tyler said, his voice firm. We need every advantage we can get. As the Defiant crew worked tirelessly to prepare for the impending attack, modifying the ship and developing countermeasures, the long-range sensors detected a disturbing development. A large number of Gamelin ships were approaching their location at high warp speed. "Captain," Lieutenant Williams announced from the tactical station, his voice infused with urgency. "We have multiple contacts bearing 220 Mark 185. Course and speed indicate they are heading directly for us. Estimated time to intercept, 15 minutes. Rostova rose from her command chair, her expression grim. "This is it," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "All hands prepare for battle. Raise shields, arm weapons." "And Lieutenant," she added, turning to Williams, "implement the defensive strategy based on Estelle's information. Let's show these Gamelins what we're made of." As the Defiant braced for impact, Tyler found Estelle in her quarters, staring blankly at the wall. He noticed a change in her demeanor, a flicker of anxiety and sadness in her eyes. "Estelle," Tyler said softly, approaching her. "Are you all right?" She turned, her expression troubled. I am afraid," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am about to face my former comrades in battle. I am betraying my people. I do not know if I can do this." Tyler stepped closer, his voice gentle and reassuring. "You are not betraying anyone, Estelle. You are helping to prevent a larger conflict. You are saving lives. You are doing the right thing." He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch firm but comforting. "I know this is difficult, but you are not alone. We are here for you. We will get through this together." His words seemed to calm her, a flicker of willpower returning to her eyes. "Thank you, Tyler," she said, her voice stronger now. I will not let you down." Suddenly, the ship lurched violently as the Gamelin fleet dropped out of warp, initiating the attack. Red alert klaxons blared throughout the Defiant, bathing the corridors in a pulsating crimson light. "All hands brace for impact." Rostova's voice boomed over the ship's intercom. "This is not a drill." On the bridge, chaos erupted as the Defiant engaged the enemy, unleashing a barrage of phaser fire and torpedoes. The ship shuddered violently as it took a direct hit, sending sparks flying from the overhead consoles. "Evasive maneuvers," Rostova commanded, her voice calm amidst the storm. "Williams, target their sensor blind spots. Let's give them a taste of their own medicine." The Defiant twisted and turned, dodging incoming fire while returning a withering barrage of its own. The jamming device, activated by Ramirez's team, began to wreak havoc on the Gamelin communications, disrupting their coordination and sowing confusion among their ranks. "Captain," Williams reported, his voice tight with excitement, "the jamming device is working. Their communications are scrambled. They're not coordinating their attacks." "Excellent," Rostova said, a grim smile playing on her lips. "Now let's lure those boarding craft into our little traps." As the Gamelin boarding craft approached the Defiant, they were met with a series of deadly surprises. Hidden plasma turrets opened fire, shredding their armor plating. Force fields slammed shut, trapping them in isolated sections of the ship. And waiting around every corner were heavily armed Defiant crew members, ready to unleash a deadly hail of plasma fire. Amidst the chaos of battle, Estelle stood beside Tyler on the bridge, her eyes scanning the tactical display. She pointed to a section of the ship where a group of Gamelin shock troops was attempting to breach a reinforced bulkhead. "They are focusing their efforts on that section," she said, her voice calm and measured. "They believe it leads directly to the bridge, but there is a concealed ventilation shaft behind the bulkhead. If you vent the atmosphere, you can flush them out." Rostova, listening intently, relayed the information to the security team. Moments later, the ventilation shaft hissed open, unleashing a torrent of icy air that swept the Gamelin shock troops into the vacuum of space. "Good work, Estelle," Rostova said, a hint of gratitude in her voice. "Your knowledge of their tactics is proving invaluable." Estelle nodded, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. She knew this battle was just the beginning, but for the first time since her capture, she felt a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging. She was no longer a prisoner but an ally, and she was determined to do everything in her power to help the Defiant crew survive. The Defiant lurched violently as a trio of Gamelin fighters exploded in quick succession, their debris scattering across the void. Estelle, her fingers flying across the console, called out, adjusting shield harmonics. "They're anticipating our standard resonance frequencies, shifting to Theta 7. "Theta 7 it is," Captain Eva Rostova affirmed from the command chair. "Good work, Lieutenant." "Estelle." The captain's hesitation was barely perceptible, a ghost of the suspicion that had initially greeted Estelle's arrival. Alarms blared as a fresh wave of Gamelin fighters launched a coordinated attack, their energy weapons hammering against the Defiant shields. The bridge shuddered with each impact. "They're focusing on shield generators 3 and 4. A tactical officer shouted. "We're losing power." Estelle, her brow furrowed in concentration, identified a specific, almost subliminal frequency embedded within the Gamelin fighter pilot communications. "I've isolated their command channel," she announced, her voice tight. "They're using a low-band carrier wave to coordinate maneuvers, intercepting. Now, they are planning a concentrated attack on weapon emplacement Beta 9. Rostova didn't hesitate. "Divert power from auxiliary life support to Beta 9. Prepare for heavy fire." As the Defiant braced for the onslaught, Tyler watched Estelle. The Gamelin science officer's face was a mask of barely suppressed anguish. Her usually sharp, focused gaze was clouded with a deep, visceral pain. The corner of her mouth twitched and was drawn tight as if she were attempting to repress a scream. He moved to stand beside her. "Estelle, are you all right?" She flinched at his touch, pulling away slightly. I am responsible for this," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the din of battle. "These were my comrades, my friends." "You're preventing a larger conflict, Estelle," Tyler reminded her gently. "You're saving lives. The Gamelin Empire won't stop with a single cruiser. But at what cost?" She countered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Am I any better than they are, leading my former friends to their deaths?" Before Tyler could respond, a new alert flashed across the main view screen. "Warning. The Gamelin flagship is altering its approach vector," the tactical officer announced. "They're no longer targeting our shields, they're going for our engines." Rostova swore under her breath. "They're changing tactics. Prepare for a boarding action. All hands brace for impact." Almost immediately, a series of sharp, metallic screeches echoed through the ship as Gamelin boarding parties, equipped with advanced cutting torches, began to breach the Defiant's hull. Alarms blared, and red emergency lights bathed the corridors in an ominous glow. Hull breaches detected in sectors 4, 7, and 12. The security officer reported. "We've got multiple boarding parties inbound." Estelle, her eyes darting across the tactical displays, suddenly stiffened. "They're targeting junction point Omega 7, she said urgently. "It's a critical vulnerability in your internal security grid, a flaw I recall from my training. If they overload the junction, they can disable the entire ship's security system." Just then, a coded message flashed across Estelle's personal console, bypassing the Defiant's jammed communication network. It was a direct transmission from the Gamelin commander. Estelle gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes widened in shock and disbelief as she read the message. Tyler, sensing her distress, moved closer. "Estelle, what is it? What's wrong?" She hesitated, her gaze darting nervously between Tyler and the console. The message on the screen burned into her retinas. Estelle, my dearest sister, return to us. Your defection has wounded our family deeply. Commander Varkas has promised amnesty if you come home now. Do not forsake your blood. The message ended, leaving Estelle paralyzed with indecision. Tyler placed a hand gently on her arm. Estelle, tell me what's happening. I can see you're in pain. She flinched, pulling away slightly, her expression a mixture of fear and shame. It's a message, she stammered. From my sister. What does it say? Tyler asked, his voice soft and reassuring. Estelle hesitated, fearing that Tyler would lose trust in her, but finally she took a deep breath and confessed. She wants me to come home. She says the commander promised me amnesty. Tyler listened patiently, his expression unchanging. When she finished, he nodded slowly. That's a difficult choice, Estelle. I understand that. What do I do, Tyler? She asked, her voice filled with anguish. I don't know what to do. Think about the consequences, Tyler said gently. Think about what the Gamelin Empire represents. Think about the potential for peace that you could help achieve, and then make your decision. The ship bucked violently as another section of the hull gave way. The sounds of phaser fire and desperate shouts echoed through the corridors. We can't hold them back much longer. Rostova's voice crackled over the comms. They're overwhelming our defenses. Estelle closed her eyes for a moment, took a breath, and then, her voice filled with newfound grit, she spoke rapidly into the comm. Captain Rostova, the boarding parties are heading for Junction Point Omega-7. They plan to disable the security grid, but I know how they plan to overload the system. Divert power from the secondary shield array to the junction. It will create a feedback loop that will fry their circuits. As the Defiance crew followed Estelle's instructions, they managed to repel the initial wave of Gamelin boarding parties. Inspired by Estelle's courage and loyalty, they fought with renewed commitment, driving the invaders back through the breached hull sections. Estelle turned to Tyler, her eyes shining with a mixture of fear and determination. I will not betray you, Tyler. I will not betray the chance for peace. She offered Tyler a small data chip. This contains a counter code for the command channel. You can send messages to the Gamelin commander posing as me. Tyler raised an eyebrow. And what should I say? Tell him, Estelle said, a grim smile playing on her lips, that I'm ready to come home. Tell him I'll be waiting at the airlock, with the access codes to the Defiance main reactor. Tyler's fingers danced across the console, mimicking the precise cadence of Gamelin command protocols. Each tap was a gamble, a whispered prayer against the deafening roar of the ongoing battle. Sweat beaded on his forehead, reflecting the flickering emergency lights. Code transmitted, he announced, his voice tight. A moment stretched into an eternity. Then the comms crackled to life. Acknowledged, Defiant, the Gamelin commander's voice, tinged with a predatory satisfaction, filled the bridge. We are initiating retrieval sequence. Transport pod will arrive at designated coordinates in 3 minutes. Prepare for Estelle's return. Tyler sucked in a breath. He bought it, extraction point confirmed. He relayed the coordinates to Lieutenant Sharma, the Defiance tactical officer. Sharma set up an ambush, close-range weaponry only. We want that pod crippled, not vaporized. Aye, sir, Sharma replied, her voice grim. As the Gamelin transport pod, a sleek obsidian dart, approached the designated area, the Defiant unleashed hell. A barrage of point defense cannons tore through the void, ripping the pod's shields apart with minimal resistance. The pod spun wildly, its trajectory shattered. They're hit. Shields down, engines crippled, Sharma reported. The Gamelin commander's voice, now infused with fury, erupted over the comms. Treachery. All units prepare for a full-scale assault on the Defiance bridge. They will pay for this deception. The bridge shuddered as the infiltrator redoubled its attack. Explosions rocked the ship, sending sparks flying from damaged consoles. Amidst the chaos, a voice, rough and gravelly, cut through the din. This is madness. Sergeant Major Reynolds, a veteran with scars etched deep into his face, pounded his fist on a nearby console. "We're trusting a gamelin. She's playing us and we're too blind to see it." "With all due respect, Sergeant Major," Tyler countered, "Estelle has provided valuable intel. She helped us cripple that extraction pod." "Intel or misdirection?" Reynolds spat. "She's one of them, Carter. She'll lead them right to our throats. We need to lock her down now before she gets us all killed." Tyler's mind focused. "Estelle is not a traitor. She's risking everything to help us." Reynolds glared at Tyler, his eyes hard. "You always were too trusting, Carter. Remember what happened on the Lexington? Your trust got good people killed." The memory hit Tyler like a physical blow. The faces of his fallen comrades, the screams, the burning wreckage. He forced himself to focus. "This is different, Reynolds." Estelle, who had been silently observing the exchange, stepped forward. Perhaps Sergeant Major Reynolds is right. If my presence endangers this ship, I will surrender myself. "No." Tyler snapped, his voice raw. "We need you, Estelle. Your knowledge of gamelin tactics, their weaknesses, it's vital to our destruction." Reynolds roared, his face flushed with anger. "She's manipulating you, Carter, can't you see it?" He turned to two other crew members, hardened veterans like himself. "Come on, we're taking her into custody." Reynolds and his faction moved towards Estelle, their faces grim. Tyler stepped in front of them, blocking their path. "You're not touching her." "Stand aside, Carter," Reynolds growled. "This is for the good of the ship. This is mutiny," Tyler retorted, his hand instinctively moving towards his sidearm. Captain Rostova, her face pale but resolute, stepped between them. "Sergeant Major Reynolds, stand down. That is an order." Reynolds ignored her. "With all due respect, Captain, I can't let you gamble with the lives of this crew." He nodded to his men. "Take her." Defiance flared in Tyler's eyes. "You'll have to go through me." The bridge erupted into a brawl. Fists flew, bodies collided with consoles, and the air crackled with tension. The Defiant shuddered violently as another volley of fire slammed into its shields. Suddenly, a direct hit rocked the bridge. A blinding flash filled the room, followed by a deafening roar. When Tyler's vision cleared, he saw sparks erupting from damaged consoles. The emergency lights flickered erratically. "Security systems offline," Sharma shouted over the din. "We've lost internal sensors." Taking advantage of the chaos, Reynolds grabbed Estelle by the arm and dragged her towards a darkened corridor. "Come on," he yelled to his followers. "Let's get her locked up before she does any more damage." "Estelle," Tyler shouted, pushing past the remaining combatants. He ignored the throbbing pain in his jaw, the metallic taste of blood in his mouth. He had to stop them. He had to save her. "Rostova, secure the bridge," he yelled over his shoulder as he gave chase. The infiltrator, sensing the internal strife on the Defiant, launched another wave of boarding parties, pouring through breached bulkheads like venom. Tyler pursued Reynolds and Estelle through the ship's labyrinthine corridors, the sounds of battle echoing around him. He finally cornered them in a damaged section of the ship, the air thick with smoke and the stench of burning metal. But as he raised his weapon, he saw the flashing red lights of gamelin boarding parties closing in from both ends of the corridor. They were trapped. The acrid smell of ozone filled the corridor as Reynolds, eyes wide with desperate fury, squeezed off a burst from his pulse rifle. The shots went wild, impacting a nearby junction box with a shower of sparks, severing the emergency lighting and plunging their section of the corridor into near darkness. A groan of tortured metal echoed from deeper within the ship. Tyler, reacting instantly, lunged forward, tackling Reynolds to the deck. The rifle clattered away, skidding across the metal plating. "Are you insane?" Tyler hissed, pinning Reynolds beneath him. "You're going to get us all killed." Reynolds struggled, his face contorted with rage and fear. "They're going to kill her. They're all going to kill us." Tyler tightened his grip, his voice low and urgent. "We survive this together. Human versus gamelin doesn't matter right now, only survival matters, understand?" Estelle, her face pale but resolute, stepped forward. He is correct. Your actions are counterproductive. She paused, thinking rapidly, her eyes scanning the damaged junction box. The ship, the damage he has caused. It may be of use, the power conduits, if rerouted. Tyler released Reynolds, who remained on the deck, panting heavily. He looked at Estelle, then back at Tyler, a flicker of shame in his eyes. There's a chance, Estelle continued, a small one. The Gamelin boarding parties will expect a standard defense. If we can utilize the damaged power grid to create a localized surge, we might be able to disable them temporarily. Tyler nodded, already assessing the situation. Reynolds, you know this ship. Where are the access panels? Where can we tap into the main power lines? Reynolds hesitated for a moment, then with a sigh of resignation, pointed towards a maintenance hatch concealed behind a scorched section of the wall. There, but it's risky. The whole system could overload. Working quickly and efficiently, Tyler, Estelle, and a grudgingly cooperative Reynolds jury rigged a makeshift defense. They used overturned equipment as barricades, strung power cables across the corridor, and rerouted energy from auxiliary systems to amplify the potential surge. The air crackled with static electricity, and the smell of burnt metal hung heavy in the air. A low hum resonated through the deck plating, growing steadily louder. The unmistakable sound of approaching Gamelin soldiers. They're here, Estelle whispered, her hand resting on a makeshift activation switch cobbled together from salvaged components. The boarding party, clad in black armor and led by a ruthless-looking commander with a cybernetic eye, rounded the corner. They moved with practiced precision, pulse rifles raised, their faces grim and determined. For the Empire, the commander barked, signaling his troops to advance. The Gamelin soldiers surged forward, weapons blazing. Tyler, Estelle, and Reynolds returned fire, taking cover behind their makeshift barricades. Pulse bolts ricocheted off the walls, and the air filled with the whine of energy weapons. Reynolds, despite his earlier outburst, fought with an unshakable focus, his movements honed by years of combat experience. Tyler, relying on his instincts and quick reflexes, weaved between cover, providing support fire and keeping the Gamelin soldiers at bay. But they were outnumbered. A pulse bolt grazed Reynolds' arm, sending a searing pain through his body. He cried out, stumbling backwards. "Reynolds!" Tyler shouted, pulling him behind cover. Blood seeped through his uniform. "I'm fine," Reynolds grunted, his face pale. "Just keep fighting." Tyler glanced at Estelle, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "Now," she yelled. Estelle slammed her hand down on the activation switch. A surge of raw power coursed through the corridor. The lights flickered violently, then died, plunging the area into darkness. A high-pitched whine filled the air, followed by a series of loud cracks and pops. The Gamelin soldiers screamed as the electrical surge coursed through their armor, overloading their systems and sending them crashing to the deck. The commander, his cybernetic eye sparking and smoking, collapsed beside his troops. Silence descended upon the corridor, broken only by the crackling of electricity and the groans of the injured. Tyler knelt beside Reynolds, examining his wound. "It's not too bad," he said, ripping a strip of cloth from his uniform to bind the injury. "But we need to get you to medical." He tightened the bandage, his expression softening slightly. He'd seen too many good people die from less. As Tyler finished tending to Reynolds' wound, the ship's comm system crackled to life. "Tyler, this is Rostova. Report to the bridge immediately. Bring the Gamelin and Reynolds with you." Her voice was sharp, betraying none of the tension he knew she must be feeling. "Understood, Captain," Tyler replied. As they made their way back to the bridge, Estelle spoke, her voice low. "The commander." The leader of the boarding party. He carried a data chip, coded. "I recognize the encryption method. It is unusual." "Unusual how?" Tyler asked. "It suggests a hidden agenda," Estelle replied. "Something beyond a simple retrieval mission." On the bridge, Rostova stood, posture impeccable, her arms crossed behind her back. The bridge crew worked with focused intensity, restoring systems and assessing the damage. "Reynolds," Rostova said, her voice cold, "your insubordination will be dealt with later. However, your combat experience proved invaluable. I expect you to control yourself in the future." Dismissed. Reynolds, humbled by the experience, simply nodded and took his place at his station. Tyler stepped forward, presenting the data chip to Rostova. "Estelle believes this contains a coded message, Captain. She can decipher it." Estelle stepped forward, her fingers flying across the console. Within moments, the coded message appeared on the main view screen. "This message," Estelle said, her voice grave, "originates from within the Gamelin High Command. A faction, a powerful faction, is attempting to sabotage the peace talks. They believe that a full-scale war with humanity is the only way to preserve the Empire's purity." Rostova's eyes narrowed. "They're trying to provoke us." "Precisely," Estelle replied. "They are manipulating events, creating incidents that will escalate tensions and ultimately lead to war." Rostova turned to Tyler, her expression grim. "Estelle's capture, it wasn't accidental, was it?" Tyler shook his head. "It was orchestrated, part of a larger conspiracy to destabilize the region." Rostova paced the bridge, her mind racing. "We need proof, something concrete to present to the High Council." She stopped, her gaze fixed on the interface. "Estelle, the message. Does it mention anything specific? Any locations, any names?" Estelle studied the message intently. "There is a reference, a cryptic one, a research facility. Hidden within the Krelian Nebula, it is designated Project Nightingale." Rostova turned to the helmsman. "Set a new course. Krelian Nebula, maximum warp." The helmsman hesitated. "But Captain, that will take us directly into Gamelin territory. It could be seen as an act of war." "We have no choice," Rostova replied, her voice firm. "We need to verify this information and expose this conspiracy before it's too late." Reynolds, standing at his station, turned to Rostova, his face etched with concern. "Captain, I understand if you don't trust me, but I want to help. I know those sectors. I can help you navigate the nebula." Rostova studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well, Reynolds. Your expertise is appreciated." Tyler and Estelle stood side by side, watching as the Defiant changed course. "This is far more complex than we initially thought," Tyler said, his voice low. Estelle nodded, her gaze fixed on the swirling stars outside the viewport. "Indeed, it appears that the greatest threat lies not from without but from within." She turned to Tyler, a flicker of something akin to hope in her eyes. "Thank you, Tyler, for trusting me." Tyler smiled, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're in this together, Estelle." As the Defiant prepared to jump to hyperspace, a low hum filled the ship. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the vessel. The lights flickered violently and the ship shuddered violently. "Captain," the engineering officer shouted, his voice filled with panic. "We've lost engine power, sabotage. Someone's disabled the warp drive." Rostova rushed to the engineering console, her face grim. "What's the status?" "The warp core is destabilizing," the officer cried. "We're losing control, we're going to crash." "Crash!" The word ripped from the comms as the Defiant bucked like a wild animal. Alarms blared, a discordant symphony of klaxons and shrieking feedback. Emergency lights flickered, painting the corridors in strobing red. Sparks showered from exposed wiring, the metallic tang of ozone stinging the air. "Report!" Rostova's voice, though distorted by the emergency broadcast system, cut through the chaos. "Damage assessment now." Tyler, Estelle, and Reynolds clawed their way towards the bridge, the deck plates vibrating violently beneath their boots. Twisted metal and severed cables littered their path. A section of the corridor wall had buckled inward, revealing the cold vacuum of space beyond. "Life support failing on decks 3 and 4. A frantic voice crackled over the comms. "Engine core temperature critical." Reynolds, despite the grimace etched on his face from his earlier injuries, was already rerouting power conduits, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Get to the bridge," he grunted, shoving a sparking cable out of Estelle's path. "I can buy you some time." A flicker of something akin to gratitude crossed the face of a nearby crewman as he watched Reynolds work. Reaching the bridge was like stepping into a war zone. Consoles sparked and smoked, displays flickered erratically, and the air hung thick with the smell of burnt circuits. Rostova, her face grim, barked orders into the comms. "Seal off decks 3 and 4. Divert all available power to life support and engine cooling. What's the status of the engines?" "Containment field failing, Captain," a harried engineer reported. "We're losing coolant fast. We need to stabilize the core or we're going to lose the engines completely." Estelle, her eyes scanning the damaged systems, spoke with a newfound urgency. "The sabotage device. It's gamelan but not standard issue. The energy signature suggests a black market modification, Captain." Tyler felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. "Captain, with all due respect, maybe I can help. I can analyze the crew's behavior, their stress levels. We can use the ship's psychological assessment tools to identify who planted that device." He pushed down the memory of the faces of the dead crewmen on the Cerberus, his failure still a raw wound. Rostova turned, her gaze intense. "Do it, Doctor, but tread carefully. We can't afford to spook the saboteur." The next few hours were a blur of subtle observation and hushed conversations. Tyler, with Estelle's surprisingly insightful assistance, moved through the ship, observing the crew. He watched for the telltale signs of deception: averted gazes, fidgeting hands, forced smiles. He listened for inconsistencies in their stories, the subtle shifts in tone that betrayed hidden guilt. Reynolds, meanwhile, was wrestling with the damaged engine core. "The control system is fried," he announced, wiping sweat from his brow. "I can reroute power, but a full repair is impossible without a specific component, a phase modulator." Estelle's expression turned thoughtful. "There is a component of that type, or something very similar, in a restricted section of the ship, a research lab sealed off years ago. It's where they studied captured alien technologies. And I'm guessing it's not exactly open to visitors." Rostova asked, a hint of weary resignation in her voice. "Access requires a high-level security clearance, Captain," Estelle confirmed. Rostova hesitated, her teeth clenched. "Damn it, we're running out of options. Override security protocols for that section, but temporarily." "Dr. Ensign, I'm trusting you both. If this is a trap..." As Tyler and Estelle resumed their observations, Tyler noticed something unusual. Lieutenant Jackson, a communications officer known for his unflappable demeanor, was exhibiting signs of increasing anxiety. He was fidgeting, avoiding eye contact, and his voice trembled slightly when he spoke. "Ensign, have you noticed anything unusual about Lieutenant Jackson's behavior?" Tyler asked, careful to keep his voice low. Estelle's brow furrowed. "He has been spending an unusual amount of time in the comms room, and I intercepted an encrypted message directed to a known gamelan black marketeer." The pieces clicked into place. "Rostova needs to know." Tyler found Rostova on the bridge, her face etched with worry. "Captain, I believe we've identified the saboteur, Lieutenant Jackson. Ensign Estelle has confirmed he's been in contact with a gamelan black marketeer." Rostova's eyes hardened. "Binge him in." Tyler and a security detachment confronted Jackson in the comms room. "Lieutenant Jackson, you're under arrest for sabotage and treason." Jackson's face paled, but his eyes hardened with defiance. "I don't know what you're talking about." Tyler stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We know about the black market contact, Lieutenant. We know you planted the device." "Why?" Jackson hesitated, his shoulders slumping. They blackmailed me. They threatened my family." "Who?" Tyler pressed. "Who blackmailed you?" Jackson shook his head, his lips pressed into a thin line. "I can't tell you. They'll kill them." Suddenly, Jackson lunged for the comms console, his fingers flying across the controls. "I have to stop you. I have to stop you from telling them." A fight erupted, a desperate struggle for control of the communication systems. Tyler, Estelle, and the security officers wrestled Jackson to the ground, finally subduing him. "Secure him," Rostova ordered, her voice ringing with authority, "and find out who his contact is." She turned to Tyler, her expression grim. "Thank you, Doctor, but this isn't over. We still have a saboteur at large and component we need." Meanwhile, Estelle returned from the restricted section, clutching the phase modulator. "I found it, Captain, but there's more. In a hidden compartment I found Gamelin communication devices, modified for long-range transmission." She paused, her eyes wide with realization. "Jackson was a distraction, Captain. The true target isn't just the Defiant. There's something bigger at play. A conspiracy to undermine the peace." Rostova leaned closer, her voice a low growl. "The name, Jackson. Who's your contact? Who gave you the device?" Jackson spat on the deck. "Go to hell." Rostova signaled to the guards. They tightened their grip, but Jackson remained defiant, a smirk playing on his lips. Frustration tightened Rostova's jaw. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Cut to Estelle, bathed in the cool blue light of the Defiance lab. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, lines of Gamelin code scrolling past her eyes. The communication devices retrieved from Jackson's ship were a puzzle, layers of encryption obscuring their secrets. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she broke through another layer, revealing a series of encrypted transmissions. Her eyes widened. These weren't just random messages, they were targeted, sent to multiple locations within the sector. Back in the brig, Rostova slammed her fist on the table. "We're running out of time. People will die because of your stubbornness." Tyler stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Captain, with your permission, I have a suggestion." Rostova turned, her expression a mix of desperation and skepticism. "What is it, Doctor?" "A neural interface," Tyler said, his gaze steady. "We can probe his subconscious, access his memories directly. It's risky, but it might be our only chance to uncover the full extent of the Gamelin plot." A flicker of memory crossed his face, a failed intervention, a life lost. Rostova hesitated, her gaze shifting between Jackson's defiant face and Tyler's earnest expression. "I don't like it, Doctor, but we're out of options. Do it, but under your strict supervision, and Estelle monitors everything." The scene shifted to a sterile medical bay. Jackson, strapped to a bio bed, glared at Tyler and Estelle. Neural probes extended from a complex machine, hovering inches from his temples. Tyler, his face etched with concern, adjusted the settings. Estelle, her eyes glued to the monitors, ran diagnostics, her Gamelin knowledge proving invaluable. "Ready, Doctor," Estelle announced, her voice tight. Tyler took a deep breath. "Begin the scan." The probes activated, bathing Jackson's face in a soft, pulsing light. His body convulsed, his eyes rolling back in his head. Fragmented images flashed across a nearby screen. Bustling spaceports, shadowy figures exchanging data chips, schematics of critical infrastructure. Tyler focused, sifting through the chaos, searching for a coherent narrative. Suddenly, a clear image emerged. A series of interconnected trade hubs, each marked with a flashing red icon. The Gamelin plan wasn't targeting military installations, it was targeting the human economy. "They're not after our ships," Tyler said, his voice strained. "They're after our trade routes. They want to cripple us, destabilize the region, make us vulnerable." Estelle's fingers flew across the console, cross-referencing the transmission locations with known trade routes. The transmissions. They match key infrastructure points, fuel refineries, food processing plants, medical supply depots, all critical for maintaining stability. A klaxon blared through the ship. Reynolds' voice crackled over the comm system. "Captain, I managed to get the component installed. Engine functionality is temporarily restored, but I'm telling you now, this is a band-aid. We need a permanent solution, and fast." Rostova, her face grim, addressed the bridge crew. "All hands prepare for immediate departure. We're intercepting the Gamelin operatives at the nearest trade hub. Priority 1, civilian safety." As the Defiant accelerated towards its destination, a garbled distress signal pierced the comms. Mayday, Mayday, this is civilian freighter Orion's Dawn. Under attack, Gamelin raiders, requesting immediate assistance. Rostova's hand tightened on the command chair. The nearest trade hub was still hours away at maximum warp. Diverting to rescue the Orion's Dawn would cost them precious time. Captain, Lieutenant Davies said, his voice urgent, we have to make a choice. Rostova closed her eyes, weighing the options. The trade hub or the freighter, thousands of lives hung in the balance. Tyler stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute. Captain, rescuing the Orion's Dawn isn't just the right thing to do, it's strategically important. It shows our commitment to protecting innocent lives, boosting morale. And if that freighter is carrying supplies destined for the trade hub, we're buying ourselves time by saving it. Rostova opened her eyes, her gaze hardening with drive. Course correction. Set a new heading for the Orion's Dawn. Engage at maximum warp. The Defiant surged forward, its weapons systems charging. The engagement with the Gamelin raiders was swift and brutal. The Defiant's superior firepower quickly overwhelmed the enemy ships, but not without sustaining further damage. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the ship shuddered under the onslaught. In the aftermath of the battle, Estelle examined the wreckage of the Gamelin raiders. Captain, these ships, they were using sophisticated jamming technology. It was designed to disrupt communications at the trade hub, preventing them from calling for help. Reynolds, examining a salvaged component, cursed under his breath. This tech. It's the same black market signature as the sabotage device. Rostova, this is bigger than we thought. Someone is supplying these Gamelins with some serious hardware. Arriving at the trade hub, the Defiant found it under siege. A larger Gamelin force, bolstered by heavy cruisers, was bombarding the space station. Explosions rocked the structure, sending debris spiraling into the void. A figure approached Rostova, Lieutenant Commander Mara, her second in command. Captain, I need to tell you something. Mara's voice was thick with emotion. I've been reporting on your actions. Rostova stared at her, stunned. Mara, how could you? I didn't want to betray the crew, Mara pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. But they threatened my family. They live back on Earth. The Gamelins, they said they'd protect them if I cooperated. The Defiant, battered and outgunned, faced a grim reality. Outmanned, outgunned, and betrayed. Sparks showered from the overhead console as Mara ripped wires free, the acrid smell of burning plastic filling the bridge. Alarms blared, a discordant symphony of impending doom. Internal defenses offline. A frantic voice shouted from weapons control. Rostova's face was a mask of fury. Rostova to security. Mara is attempting to sabotage the Defiant. Apprehend her immediately. The order sparked a schism. 2 security officers moved to comply, while a third hesitated, glancing nervously at Mara. She's one of us, Captain, her family. Her family is safe. Rostova snapped, her voice echoing across the bridge. That was the deal. Now stand down or you're aiding and abetting treason. The hesitation fractured. A brief, brutal firefight erupted, phaser blasts ricocheting off consoles, the air thick with smoke and the metallic tang of blood. Tyler, caught in the crossfire, dove for cover behind a damaged navigation station. He scrambled to his feet, raising his hands. Everyone stop, this is madness. We're all crew members here, we're the Defiant. His words cut through the chaos. Faces, contorted with rage and fear, softened. The security officer who had hesitated lowered his weapon. He's right, he muttered, shame creeping into his voice. What are we doing? Tyler pressed his advantage. Mara made a mistake, a bad one, but we can't let this tear us apart. We're a crew, a family. We fight together, we die together. Remember the oath. Slowly, grudgingly, weapons were lowered. Rostova, her chest heaving, nodded curtly. Security, take Mara into custody. Secure the bridge. As Mara was led away, Estelle, her brow furrowed in concentration, called out from her station. Captain, I've been analyzing Mara's transmissions. I've found something. An override code. It appears to be designed to bypass the trade hub's security protocols. Rostova's eyes widened. The Gamelins. A new alarm blared, louder and more insistent than before. We are under heavy attack. Reynolds's voice crackled over the comms. Their forces are overwhelming the station's defenses. The main view screen flickered to life, displaying a scene of utter devastation. Gamelin cruisers rained down laser fire on the trade hub, its once imposing structures crumbling into fiery debris. Panic-stricken figures scurried through the corridors, desperately seeking shelter. Reynolds, status report. Rostova barked. Engines are failing again, Captain. We can't outrun them. Rostova stared at the carnage on the screen, her mind racing. They're not just after the resources, she murmured, her voice barely audible. They're after something else. She accessed the trade hub schematics, her fingers flying across the console. There's a hidden research facility beneath the station. A high-security installation. What's inside? Tyler asked, his voice tight with apprehension. A prototype energy weapon, Rostova replied grimly. Humanity's last hope. The only thing that could turn the tide of this war. Estelle gasped. The Gamelins will reverse engineer it. They'll use it against you. We have to warn the facility, Rostova said, her fingers dancing across the comms panel. Alert them to the attack. Static crackled from the speakers. Gamelin jamming technology. We can't get through. Tyler rubbed his temples, his mind working furiously. Captain, I have a plan. A long shot, but it might be our only chance. We use the Defiant as a Trojan horse. We infiltrate the Gamelin fleet and disable their jamming device from within. Rostova stared at him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and desperation. Are you insane? That's suicide. It's our only chance to save the research facility, Tyler insisted. And the weapon, we can do this. Rostova hesitated, her gaze sweeping across the faces of her crew. She saw fear, but she also saw dedication. All right, she said, her voice firm. Prepare the Defiant for stealth INE. We're going in. The Defiant shimmered, its hull phasing into a distorted image as the salvaged Gamelin stealth module engaged. Estelle, her eyes fixed on the sensor readings, guided them through the debris field, her knowledge of Gamelin technology proving invaluable. There, she said, pointing to a cluster of cruisers. The Gamelin flagship. The Dominator, it's the source of the jamming signal if we can disable its shield generator. Suddenly, a klaxon blared. Intruder alert, Section 6. Rostova whirled around, her hand instinctively reaching for her phaser. Mara stood silhouetted in the doorway to the engine room, a phaser rifle clutched in her hands. I can't let you do this, she said, her voice trembling. My family, Rostova leveled her own weapon. They're safe, Mara, I gave you my word. I don't believe you, Mara screamed. You're going to get us all killed. Reynolds's voice cut through the tension. Captain, I've rigged a temporary bypass. We can achieve maximum speed, but it'll burn out the engines in minutes. The Defiant lurched violently as the engines surged, throwing everyone off their feet. Alarms screamed, the ship groaning under the strain. We've been detected, Estelle shouted. The Dominator has locked onto our signal. Rostova stared at Mara, her face etched with exhaustion and despair. Then she turned to the view screen, her eyes fixed on the approaching Gamelin flagship. Reynolds, prepare to engage the bypass. Tyler, get Mara under control. Estelle, guide us to that shield generator. It's time to make a choice, a sacrifice. We try to capture the prototype or sacrifice the Defiant to slow down the Gamelins. Rostova's fist slammed into Mara's jaw, sending a spray of crimson droplets into the recycled air. Mara, despite her smaller frame, twisted, grappling for the knife tucked into Rostova's belt. You'll execute them all, my children, she spat, her voice a guttural snarl. Rostova, face contorted with fury, wrestled the knife free. They are traitors, they aided the enemy. The blade flashed in the dim light. Enough, Tyler shouted, stepping between them, grabbing Rostova's wrist. The metal of her prosthetic arm was cold and unyielding beneath his fingers. "Commander, stop. She's valuable. We need her." Rostova's eyes, hard and unforgiving, bored into Tyler. "She is a Gamelin, an enemy." "She is also terrified," Tyler countered, his voice firm but calm. "And she knows these systems. Think about it. We disable that jamming device, and suddenly we have access to the entire Gamelin network. Mara can guide us. She can tell us where to go, what to avoid." He locked eyes with Rostova, trying to convey the urgency of the situation. "I can guarantee her cooperation, but not if you kill her." Rostova hesitated, her grip on the knife loosening slightly. The fight drained from her face, replaced by a cold calculation. "Fine," she finally conceded, shoving Mara away. "But after this is over, she is confined to quarters, under heavy guard. Is that understood?" Tyler nodded grimly. "Understood." A flicker of static crackled over the comms. "Commander," Reynolds' voice, tight with anxiety, filled the cramped space. "The engine bypass is fluctuating. I'm pushing it as hard as I can, but it's unstable. And the cloak, it's flickering. We're increasing the risk of detection every second." Estelle, hunched over a console, her fingers flying across the holographic display, spoke without looking up. "I have identified the Gamelin flagship's internal sensor network. There are blind spots, patrol patterns. I can guide you." Lines of code cascaded down her screen, highlighting pathways through the vessel. Using Estelle's data, Rostova piloted the Defiant through the labyrinthine corridors of the Gamelin flagship. The ship groaned under the strain, the artificial gravity wavering as they skirted dangerously close to a passing patrol. Alarms blared faintly in the distance, a constant reminder of their precarious situation. "The jamming device," Estelle announced, her voice barely a whisper. "It's located deep within the flagship's command center, heavily guarded." Tyler, observing the holographic schematics, noticed something else. The Gamelin crew members depicted seemed agitated. Their movements were jerky, their interactions tense. "Commander, look at the crew disposition. They're exhibiting signs of stress, paranoia." Estelle glanced at the display, her brow furrowing. "The captain. He is known for his ruthless tactics. He trusts no one. But he is also exceptionally skilled at logistics. He is efficient." Suddenly, a klaxon blared, cutting through the tension. Red lights flashed, bathing the bridge in an ominous glow. "Contact!" Reynolds yelled over the comms. "Gamelin patrol, they're heading our way." Rostova swore under her breath, slamming the Defiant into a sharp turn, narrowly avoiding a collision with an oncoming vessel. Pulse cannons roared to life, tearing through the corridor walls. A firefight erupted, the confined space amplifying the deafening blasts. "I'm rerouting power to the forward shields," Reynolds shouted, his voice strained. "But I need time. Buy me some time." He then rerouted the power, causing a section of the ship's corridor to be engulfed in a spark-filled explosion, giving the Defiant crew an opportunity to escape the immediate firefight, but further damaging the engines. "There." Estelle pointed to a narrow accessway on the holographic display. "A hidden maintenance tunnel. It leads directly to the command center. But it's smaller than the Defiant." Rostova's teeth clenched. "We have no choice." Reynolds, prepare to abandon ship. Set the Defiant to minimal power and vent the atmosphere in sections we've already cleared. We'll use it as a temporary base of operations." "Commander, that's insane," Reynolds protested. "It's our only option," Rostova snapped. "Do it." Tyler, Rostova, Estelle, and a small team of heavily armed Marines gathered in the Defiant's armory. Rostova began issuing orders, assigning positions and outlining the infiltration plan. They were leaving Reynolds to maintain the cloak and the life support systems. As the team prepared to disembark, a muffled clang echoed from the corridor outside. Rostova whirled around, her hand instinctively reaching for her sidearm. "Report," she barked. A young Marine, his face pale, stammered, "Commander Mara, she's gone, she escaped." Rostova cursed, a string of guttural oaths escaping her lips. "Find her, now." Ignoring the chaos, Estelle focused on her handheld scanner as they approached the tunnel entrance. "Commander," she said, her voice tight with urgency, "I am detecting a secondary energy signature emanating from within the command center." Rostova frowned. "What is it?" Estelle's eyes widened, her face paling. "The jamming device. It's not just blocking communications, it's masking something else. A prototype. An energy weapon. It's here on the flagship." Mara moved with a practiced efficiency born of necessity. Two Gamelin guards stood before a makeshift barricade of crates and power conduits, their laser rifles held loosely. She could smell the recycled air, thick with the metallic tang of the ship. Home, but twisted, corrupted. A pang of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Loyalty shot through her. She could kill them, of course, but she wouldn't. Not if she didn't have to. A quick burst of compressed air from her wrist-mounted stunner took them both down before they could even register a threat. Non-lethal. She still cared. She had to. The maintenance tunnel was a rat's warren of pipes and conduits, barely wide enough for Rostova to move comfortably. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and stale lubricant. Every few meters, a flickering emergency light cast long, distorted shadows. "Damn this place," Rostova muttered, her voice echoing slightly. "Feels like a coffin." Estelle, her face pale in the dim light, consulted a battered datapad. The schematics indicate several pressure seals and automated defense turrets. "We need to proceed carefully." Her voice trembled slightly. Tyler, noticing her distress, moved closer. "Estelle, you okay? You seem tense." She flinched. "The weapon. It's close. I can feel it. The energy. It's wrong." "You don't have to do this," Tyler said softly, his voice barely a whisper. "Remember what you said about wanting a choice, about wanting to be free." Rostova rounded on him, her eyes narrowed. "Doctor, with all due respect, save the therapy session for later. We have a mission to complete. The jamming field is our priority. Every second we waste here increases the risk to the fleet." "And what about the risk to everyone on this ship if that weapon goes off?" Tyler countered, his voice rising. Rostova ignored him. "Mara, anything." Mara paused, her hand resting on a pipe. "Recent activity. Someone else has been through here. Recently." She pointed to a discarded ration pack, the Gamelin insignia still visible. They weren't careful. A muffled conversation drifted from a side passage. Mara froze, pressing herself against the wall. Tyler and Rostova followed suit, weapons raised. "Holding them in the command center makes things simpler," a gruff voice said in Gamelin. "The High Commander approved." Another voice replied. "He understands the necessity. Leverage, you understand." Mara's breath hitched, her family, hostages. She balled her fists, her fingers tightening. The passage opened into a junction. One tunnel led straight ahead, dimly lit and seemingly empty. The other branched off to the right, disappearing into shadow. Estelle consulted her datapad again. "The path ahead leads to the command center," she said, her voice barely audible. "The other, to the energy weapon storage area." She swallowed hard, her eyes wide with fear. "That weapon. It's unstable, a prototype. If mishandled, if the containment field collapses, it will detonate this entire flagship. Everything on it will be vaporized." Rostova's face was a mask of grit. "The jamming device is our priority. If we can disable it, the fleet can target this ship and end this quickly. We continue forward." "Are you insane?" Tyler exploded. "That weapon could go off at any minute." "We have to disarm it first." Rostova glared at him. "We follow the mission parameters, Doctor. That is an order." Mara stepped forward, her eyes pleading. "Please, my family. They're in the command center. I know the layout. I can help you get to them. And then we can deal with the weapon." Rostova's expression did not soften. "I understand your concern, Gamelin, but the mission takes precedence. We cannot risk diverting resources." "Risk?" Tyler stepped between Mara and Rostova, his voice shaking with anger. "She's offering us a way in, a way to save lives. What kind of monster are you?" "I am a soldier, Doctor, and you will follow my orders." Tyler stared at Rostova, his face a mixture of disbelief and disgust. Then he turned to Mara. I'm with you, let's go get your family. He activated his comm. Kira, I'm diverting from the primary objective. Rostova and I are heading to the command center to rescue hostages. Estelle, secure the jamming device and if you can, disable that weapon. Rostova shoved past him, her face contorted with rage. You are disobeying a direct order, Doctor. This could cost us everything. Then consider it the cost of doing what's right, Tyler said, his voice firm. Come on, Rostova, you can either help us or you can stand here and watch us go. He knew she'd follow. She was too driven to let him out of her sight. Estelle watched them go, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. Loyalty, fear, and a flicker of something else. Hope. She gripped her datapad, her squeezing hard. The fate of the flagship, perhaps the fate of the war, rested on her shoulders. Mara led Tyler and Rostova down the tunnel toward the command center, moving with a speed and agility that belied her size. She knew these tunnels. She knew the patrol routes. She moved like a ghost, avoiding detection with an almost preternatural sense. Suddenly, Estelle's voice crackled over Tyler's comm. Tyler, the captain, he's activated the weapon's charging sequence. The countdown has begun. You don't have much time. Her voice was strained, on the verge of breaking. Tyler swore under his breath. They were running out of time. Mara stopped abruptly, gesturing for them to halt. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a small alcove. 3 heavily armed Gamelin soldiers stood guard before a reinforced door, the entrance to the command center. Before anyone could react, the Gamelins opened fire. Laser bolts ripped through the air, scorching the walls and sending sparks flying. The firefight had begun. Estelle, alone in the tunnel leading to the jamming device and the prototype weapon, heard the distant crackle of laser fire. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Then her comm crackled to life. It wasn't Tyler nor Rostova. It was a voice she recognized. Security teams 4, 7, and 9 converge on Sector Gamma 7-2. Possible intruder activity detected. Reinforcements were on their way. The whine of energy weapons filled the corridor as Tyler slammed himself against a bulkhead, the acrid smell of ionized air stinging his nostrils. Mara, a whirlwind of controlled fury, darted past him, her prosthetic arm a blur as she discharged her pulse rifle. Left flank clear. She barked, her voice tight with adrenaline. Rostova, positioned behind a makeshift barricade of overturned crates, laid down a steady stream of cover fire. That diversion of yours is costing us time, Carter, she grunted, disapproval etched on her face. We need to move. Mara, weaving through the downed Gamelin security personnel, punched a sequence into a nearby access panel. This way, I know a shortcut. She led them through a maze of narrow corridors, bypassing heavily fortified checkpoints. The resistance stiffened as they neared the command center's outer defenses, energy beams ricocheting off the bulkheads. Meanwhile, in a secluded alcove, Estelle worked frantically at a console, her fingers flying across the holographic display. Blue sparks danced around her hands as she rerouted power from non-essential life support systems, diverting every available joule to slow the energy weapons charging sequence. Each second was precious. Sweat beaded on her brow as she accessed the jamming device's control panel. Her fingers hovered over the activation rune. A cascade of alien symbols filled the screen, a complex jumble of diagnostic codes. There's a manual override, she muttered, her voice strained, but the sequence, it's impossibly complex. A growing unease settled in her stomach. The codes felt wrong. Back in the corridor, Mara pointed to a reinforced door at the end of the passage. That's at the main command center, heavily guarded. Locked down. She scanned the surrounding area, her eyes narrowed in concentration. But, she pointed upwards, there's a ventilation shaft, small but it might work. Tyler peered up at the narrow opening, barely wide enough to squeeze through. Stealth entry. Our only option, Mara affirmed grimly. Rostova, you provide overwatch. If things go south, cover our escape. Rostova nodded, her expression grim. Don't get yourselves killed, I'm not coming in after you. Tyler clapped Mara on the shoulder, a nervous grin on his face. All right, let's get this done. He boosted Mara up to the shaft, then with a grunt hauled himself up after her. Estelle, her brow furrowed in concentration, stared at the scrambled diagnostic codes. A chill ran down her spine. The override system wasn't just locked, it had been deliberately sabotaged. The Gamelin captain. He'd made sure no one could disarm the weapon. A wave of nausea washed over her. He was willing to sacrifice everyone on board. Inside the ventilation shaft, Tyler and Mara crawled through the cramped space, the metal grating digging into their skin. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through the cracks in the metal. The air was thick with the smell of stale, recycled air and ozone. Visibility was near zero. How much further? Tyler rasped, his voice muffled by the confines of the shaft. Almost there, Mara replied, her voice equally strained. Outside, Rostova detected movement on her scanner. Incoming. Squad of Gamelins heading your way. They're going to breach the entrance. She raised her pulse rifle, bracing herself for the inevitable firefight. Tyler and Mara reached the end of the ventilation shaft. Below them, the main command center stretched out before them. Mara's breath hitched. Her family, her parents, and younger brother were held captive in a shielded enclosure in the center of the room. The Gamelin captain stood nearby, his back to them, overseeing the final stages of the weapon's activation. Guards were everywhere. The captain turned, his reptilian eyes narrowing as he spotted them. Intruders, seize them. Estelle, her hands trembling, hammered the final rune into place. Mayday, mayday, this is Estelle of the Infiltrator, she transmitted, her voice infused with desperation. The energy weapon is about to detonate. Request immediate extraction. Outside, Rostova unleashed a hail of pulse fire as the Gamelin soldiers stormed the entrance. Energy bolts slammed into the barricade, showering her with sparks and debris. She returned fire with deadly accuracy, dropping several Gamelins before they could reach her. Tyler, ignoring the chaos around him, dropped from the ventilation shaft, landing heavily on the floor. Mara, go, get your family. He charged towards the captain, firing his pulse pistol, creating a diversion. Mara, her face a mask of commitment, sprinted towards the shielded enclosure. She reached the control panel and slammed her fist on the override switch. Nothing. A red light flashed ominously. A synthesized voice announced, "Security failsafe activated. Enclosure locked." Mara was trapped inside with her family. The Gamelin captain, a cruel smile twisting his lips, raised his hand. Execute the prisoners. Tyler froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He had a choice to make, save Mara's family or stop the captain from activating the weapon. He could not do both. Just then, a surge of energy coursed through the ship. The lights flickered violently, and a deafening alarm blared through the corridors. Red lights flashed, bathing the command center in an ominous glow. A synthesized voice boomed. Warning! System overload, ship-wide lockdown initiated. The lockdown slammed into effect, emergency lights strobing crimson across the command center. Tyler, despite the pounding in his ears, saw Mara's family huddled together, fear etched on their faces. He saw the Gamelin captain sneer, the weapon still primed, a death sentence hanging in the air. Screw it. He wasn't going to let this happen again. He lunged toward the shield generator controls, a tangle of sparking wires and shattered panels, drawing the Gamelin captain's laser fire. Bolts scorched the air where he'd been a moment before. Tyler, no, stop the weapon, Mara shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. She was torn, he knew, between saving her family and the potential devastation the weapon could unleash. The moral conflict twisted her face. There has to be another way. The Gamelin captain, face contorted with rage at Tyler's defiance, barked an order into his comm, overriding the lockdown protocols. Activate the weapon. Immediately. Ignore the failsafe. Rostova, having cleared the initial wave of Gamelin soldiers, was pinned down behind an overturned console just outside the command center. Laser fire chewed at the metal around her, her comms silent, cut off by the lockdown. She couldn't reach them. Ignoring the searing pain in his side, Tyler ripped apart the security failsafe, a cascade of sparks erupting as he severed the final connection. He freed Mara and her family, but the shield generator, pushed beyond its limits, exploded in a shower of plasma and shrapnel. The blast wave slammed into him, throwing him off his feet. Command center systems flickered and died. The Gamelin captain, unmoved by the chaos, seized the opportunity. He activated the weapon's firing sequence manually, bypassing the damaged control systems. A crimson countdown timer blazed onto the main screen, 00:59. A flicker of movement. Estelle, somehow, despite the lockdown, had managed to reroute power to a secondary terminal near the command center. It was barely operational, sparking and hissing, but it was something. Tyler, scrambling to his feet, tasted blood in his mouth. He saw the countdown, the weapon charging, felt the oppressive weight of the situation. He was out of time. He had to stop the captain. Mara, adrenaline surging, rallied her family. "Get down, find cover," she yelled, shoving them behind overturned consoles. Her willpower hardened. She would help Tyler. A voice, distorted but familiar, crackled in Tyler's ear. "Carter, can you hear me? This is Estelle. I've managed to reroute power. Partial schematic of the emergency system sent. There's a possible escape route, but systems are failing rapidly." Tyler surged forward, intercepting the captain, launching into a desperate brawl. Mara, grabbing a discarded Gamelin rifle, its power cell disrupted but still capable of firing bursts of energy, provided cover, drawing the captain's fire. The Gamelin captain, a honed warrior, moved with brutal efficiency. He disarmed Tyler with a swift kick, sending the weapon skittering across the floor. He grabbed Tyler by the throat, lifting him off his feet. Human weakness. "You prioritize emotion over duty," he snarled, preparing to deliver the killing blow, emphasizing the captain's adherence to Gamelin ideals of strength and discipline. Mara, with a desperate cry, hurled herself at the captain, slamming into his legs. The distraction was enough. Tyler, gasping for air, managed to grab a discarded plasma pistol and fire, disabling the manual activation console with a well-aimed shot. With the manual activation disabled, the weapon defaulted back to the automated sequence, its charge time drastically reduced due to the damage. The countdown reset, 00:27. The emergency lockdown continued. "This way." Estelle's voice, urgent and strained, guided them. "Emergency override terminal, section 4. Bypass the main lockdown but requires a full system reboot. Ship will be vulnerable." Tyler, Mara close behind, sprinted towards the designated terminal, dodging sparks and falling debris. The weapon's countdown ticked down relentlessly. 00:19, 00:18, 00:17. On the Defiant, alarms blared as Estelle's distress signal cut through the comms. Captain Eva Rostova, patched through from her position, barked orders. "Prepare for high-risk extraction. Weapons hot. We're going in." The Defiant prepared to risk everything. Tyler reached the override terminal, a complex array of glowing symbols and damaged circuitry. The system reboot sequence was displayed, a chaotic cascade of code. He had seconds, 00:09, 00:08, 00:07. He initiated the reboot. The ship plunged into temporary darkness, the emergency lights flickering and dying. Chaos erupted as Gamelin soldiers stumbled in the dark. 00:03, 00:02, 00:01. As the ship rebooted, the weapon's countdown reached 0. The screen cut to static. The countdown reached 0. But instead of the satisfying hum of deactivated weapons, a strangled whine filled the command center, escalating into a deafening screech. The lights flickered violently, plunging the bridge into near darkness before the emergency strobes kicked in, painting the scene in harsh, disorienting flashes. A wave of heat washed over Tyler, followed by the acrid smell of burning circuits. The weapon, hastily rebooted and pushed beyond its limits, had malfunctioned. The intended disabling pulse hadn't reached its target. Instead, a localized energy surge ripped through a section of the infiltrator. Emergency klaxons blared, their piercing cries echoing through the twisted metal and sparking wires of the command center. Gamelin crew members, faces streaked with soot and blood, stumbled around, dazed. Estelle, gripping a damaged console, shook her head, trying to clear the ringing in her ears. "This way," she shouted over the din, her voice tight with urgency. "The extraction point." Deck 4, but the surge might have damaged the primary route. Tyler, with Mara close behind, followed Estelle through the ruined corridors. The air hung thick with smoke and the metallic tang of blood. Twisted conduits snaked across the floor, spitting sparks. Every few meters they encountered pockets of resistance lone Gamelin soldiers, weapons raised, faces contorted with fury. Tyler, his pulse hammering in his ears, relied on his training firing precise bursts from his borrowed pulse rifle, while Mara, surprisingly agile, used the wreckage as cover, returning fire with a scavenged sidearm. A jolt shuddered through the ship. Estelle cursed under her breath. "The Defiant! They're making a run for us." Indeed, the Defiant, detecting the energy surge and the temporary lull in the infiltrator's defenses, was executing a daring maneuver. Risking collision, the human ship was edging close, positioning itself to receive the escaping crew. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, Estelle worked furiously at damaged access panels, her fingers flying across the scorched controls. "Security protocols overridden," she announced, her voice strained. "Weapon systems offline in this sector, redirecting power to life support." Mara watched Estelle, her expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. "My family, are they?" Estelle hesitated, her face etched with guilt. "They're alive, injured but alive, in Sector 7 near the escape pod bays." They rounded a corner and were met by a squad of Gamelin soldiers, their weapons trained on the fleeing trio. "For the Empire!" one of them roared. Tyler and Mara exchanged a look. "Go, Estelle!" Tyler yelled, diving behind a toppled console, returning fire. Mara joined him, her shots finding their mark with surprising accuracy. Estelle, her face a mask of commitment, manipulated the ship systems, sealing off the corridor behind them with a crashing blast door. "That will slow them," she said, her voice tight. Another, larger jolt rocked the ship, accompanied by the thunderous roar of weapons fire. "They're engaging," Estelle shouted. "We need to hurry." She led them deeper into the ship, her knowledge of the infiltrator's layout proving invaluable. The emergency escape pod bay. It's rarely used, but it's close to Sector 7. They reached the bay, a small, cramped space containing a single, antiquated escape pod. The walls were scarred with age, the air thick with the smell of disuse. "Sector 7 is just beyond that maintenance hatch," Estelle said, pointing to a sealed door. Tyler hesitated, his gaze shifting between Mara and the hatch. "I have to go get them." Mara's eyes widened. "But it's too dangerous. We need to get off this ship." "You go with Estelle," Tyler said, his voice firm. "Get to the Defiant. I'll bring them to you." Estelle looked conflicted. "It's too risky, Tyler. They'll be expecting you." "I know," Tyler said, meeting her gaze, "but I can't leave them behind." Estelle, understanding the depth of his perseverance, nodded slowly. She reached into her uniform and pulled out a small data chip. "Take this. It contains vital intelligence about Gamelin fleet formations and weaknesses. Get it to your commanders." Mara looked from Tyler to Estelle, her face etched with worry. Tyler looked at Mara. "We'll see each other again." He turned and disappeared through the maintenance hatch. Estelle placed a hand on Mara's shoulder, guiding her towards the escape pod. "We have to go. Now." Tyler moved quickly through the maintenance tunnels, pulse rifle raised. He encountered heavy resistance, desperate Gamelin soldiers determined to stop him. He fought with a ferocity born of desperation, each shot precise, each movement calculated. He found Mara's family huddled in a damaged storage room, her husband, limping with a leg wound, and their 2 children clutching each other, their faces pale with fear. "Come on," Tyler urged, helping Mara's husband to his feet. "We have to go." He led them back through the tunnels, the sounds of battle echoing around them. They reached the escape pod bay just as the Defiant, sustaining heavy damage, made its final, desperate move. A section of the infiltrator's hull near the escape pod bay buckled and tore open, creating a jagged, temporary breach. "Now!" Tyler shouted, pushing Mara's family towards the opening. "Go, go, go," he urged, helping the children clamber through the twisted metal. Mara, tears streaming down her face, turned to Tyler. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." They shared a moment of quiet connection, a silent understanding forged in the crucible of shared danger before she followed her family into the breach. As Tyler, Mara, her family and Estelle reached the Defiant through the breach, Tyler and Mara exchanged a look of shared experiences. The Defiant disengaged from the infiltrator, initiating a rapid escape jump to hyperspace. The abrupt acceleration slammed them against the makeshift restraints. Behind them, the damaged Gamelin ship was left behind. On the infiltrator, alarms blared as the crippled vessel sent out a distress call to the Gamelin fleet, reporting the Defiant's escape and with bitter emphasis Estelle's betrayal. On the Defiant, Estelle slumped against a bulkhead, her face pale. I did what I could," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I rerouted power, disabled weapon systems. It will give you an advantage, but it marks you as a traitor," Tyler finished, kneeling beside her. "You made the right decision, Estelle. You saved lives." He offered her a hand and she took it, her grip tight. "Welcome to the Defiant," he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "You're one of us now." The final scene showed the Defiant streaking through the swirling colors of hyperspace. Mara, safely reunited with her family, looked back at the receding image of the infiltrator in her mind, the ship becoming a distant memory. Alarms blared, painting the Defiant's bridge in strobing red. Sparks showered from a severed conduit near the helm, momentarily obscuring Lieutenant Park's face as he fought to maintain course. "Damage report," Captain Eva Rostova barked, her voice tight. "Hyperdrive offline, Captain," a voice crackled over the comms. "Shields at 40%, life support. Nominal, we're bleeding atmosphere, but containment teams are working on it." Rostova nodded grimly. "Casualties. Minimal considering engineering took the brunt of it." Below decks in the Defiant's cramped med bay, Mara held her youngest child, Alara, close. The little girl's eyes were wide and unfocused, her breathing shallow. Across from them, her husband, Jackson, stared blankly at the wall, his hand trembling. A medic administered a sedative, his face etched with concern. Their physical wounds were minor, but the psychological scars, those would take longer to heal. In a dimly lit observation room, Tyler sat across from Estelle. The Gamelin science officer fidgeted, her multi-jointed fingers twisting nervously. "You understand the strategic importance of this, Estelle?" Tyler asked, his voice gentle but firm. Estelle hesitated. "The fleet movements. I can provide schematics, deployment patterns, weaknesses in their defensive grids." Her voice was a low murmur, barely audible above the hum of the ship. "I have detailed knowledge." Tyler leaned forward. "We need that knowledge, Estelle. It could save lives." Tears welled in Estelle's large black eyes. "But my family, they will suffer for my betrayal. Retribution will be swift." Tyler reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "We will protect you, Estelle, and we will do everything in our power to ensure your family's safety." "You did the right thing." A moment later, Mara entered the room, her face drawn but determined. "I can help," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "With the translation, the analysis. I need to do something." Tyler nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Thank you, Mara. Your skills will be invaluable." On the bridge, Rostova convened a war council. Holographic projections of Gamelin cruisers danced in the air, highlighting their superior firepower. "Estelle's intelligence gives us a fighting chance," Rostova said, her gaze sweeping across the faces of her officers. "But it also paints a target on our backs. Valkos will be relentless." Light years away, aboard the Gamelin flagship Retribution, Admiral Valkos banged his hand on the command console. "The infiltrator, a failure, and Estelle, a traitor." His voice, amplified by the ship's comm system, resonated with fury. "Issue a fleet-wide order. The Defiant is to be captured or destroyed. No exceptions." He turned to his lieutenant, Zara, whose eyes gleamed with cold efficiency. "Dispatch the Hunter-Killer Squadron, Zara. I want the Defiant silenced, permanently." Zara, her face an emotionless mask, bowed her head. "As you command, Admiral." She reviewed the data transmitted from the infiltrator, her gaze lingering on the psychological profiles of the Defiant's crew. Interesting, she thought. So predictable. A plan began to form in her mind, a plan to exploit their weaknesses, their fears, their very humanity. Across Gamelin space, a propaganda message blared from every comm channel. "Estelle, designated traitor. Her actions are a stain upon the Gamelin Empire. Any who aid or abet her will be met with the full force of our retribution." Back on the Defiant, the sensor officer's voice cut through the tension. "Captain, we have multiple contacts. Gamelin Hunter-Killer Squadron closing fast." Rostova's lips pursed. "They're hunting us." In the observation room, Tyler and Estelle worked feverishly, analyzing Zara's tactical patterns. "She's predictable," Tyler said, his brow furrowed. "Ruthless but predictable. She'll exploit our known weaknesses." "She will anticipate our attempts to evade," Estelle added, her voice tight. "She knows our limitations." Mara, her eyes glued to the sensor readings, spoke up. "There's a pattern in their movements. They're hurting us. Towards the Xylos Nebula." "The Xylos Nebula," Rostova frowned. "That's suicide, the electromagnetic interference. Our sensors will be useless." "Exactly," Tyler said, a glint in his eye. "It's a gamble, but it's our only chance. We use the nebula to mask our movements, to even the playing field." On the Retribution, Zara reviewed the sensor data. "They are taking the bait, Admiral. They are heading straight into the nebula." She deployed a series of advanced sensor probes, designed to penetrate the nebula's electromagnetic interference. "They cannot escape," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. The Defiant plunged into the swirling chaos of the Xylos Nebula, its hull buffeted by electromagnetic storms. On the bridge, the crew braced themselves for the unknown. On the Retribution, Zara smiled, a cold, predatory expression that sent a chill down the spines of her crew. "The trap is set," she murmured. "Their end is near." The Defiant lurched violently as it plunged into the crimson heart of the nebula. Static crackled across the bridge, the familiar hum of the ship's systems dissolving into a cacophony of interference. On the main view screen, the swirling cosmic dust painted grotesque, shifting shapes that danced just beyond the edge of visibility. "Sensors are almost completely blind, Captain," Lieutenant Morales reported, his voice strained. "But Commander Mara's modifications. They're giving us a flicker, a ghost of an image. Not enough for targeting, though." Outside, Zara's squadron of Gamelin fighters, sleek and predatory, weaved through the nebula's chaotic currents. Each ship deployed a series of sensor probes, tiny metallic spiders that spun intricate webs of detection. They were Zara's eyes in the storm, patiently mapping the Defiant's heat signature against the background radiation. "They're using sensor probes, Captain," Ensign Williams reported, his fingers flying across the console. "Tracking us through the gaps in the interference, maintaining formation. Professional, disciplined." In his small office adjacent to the bridge, Tyler Carter stared at the tactical display, his brow furrowed. He saw Zara's strategy not as a series of calculated moves, but as a carefully orchestrated emotional assault. She wasn't just targeting the ship, she was targeting the crew. She's looking for weaknesses, he thought, the cracks in our armor, and she knows where to find them. He remembered the psychological profiles. The infiltrator had stolen a detailed map of their hopes, fears, and vulnerabilities. A priority transmission flashed on the screen. It was from Zara, directed specifically at Mara. Mara, daughter of a disgraced family. Your loyalty is admirable, but is it worth sacrificing your children's future? Return, Estelle, and I guarantee their safety. Refuse and their names will be forever tarnished by your treason. The message hung in the air like a poisoned dart. Tyler felt a cold dread creep up his spine. He had to warn them. He burst onto the bridge, his voice urgent. Captain, Zara is using targeted psychological warfare. That message to Mara. It's designed to exploit her deepest fears. We need to be ready for more. She'll target anyone with a known vulnerability. Mara, her face pale but resolute, nodded grimly. Understood, Doctor. All crew be vigilant. Zara is attempting to manipulate us. Do not let her succeed. Estelle, standing beside the command chair, listened intently. Her gamelan face was impassive, but Tyler could sense a flicker of recognition. Captain, Estelle said, her voice low. Zara's message. It contains a hidden code embedded within the gamelan communication protocols. It reveals the squadron's precise location, updated in real time. Can you decrypt it? Captain Eva Rostova asked, her eyes narrowed. Affirmative. Estelle worked swiftly, her fingers dancing across the console. The tactical display flickered, and suddenly a series of faint blips appeared, marking the positions of Zara's fighters. Excellent work, Estelle, Rostova said, a hint of gratitude in her voice. Helm, evasive maneuvers. Use the asteroids and magnetic anomalies to mask our movements. The Defiant responded instantly, twisting and turning through the nebula's treacherous currents. The ship shuddered as it narrowly avoided a collision with a massive asteroid, its surface scarred and pitted by eons of cosmic bombardment. Outside, Zara watched the Defiant's erratic movements with cold satisfaction. They're predictable, she murmured to her second in command. They think they can hide in the chaos, but I know them. I know their limitations. She repositioned her squadron, cutting off the Defiant's most likely escape routes, tightening the noose. Back on the bridge, the atmosphere was growing increasingly tense. The crew members targeted by Zara's initial scan were showing signs of strain. Lieutenant Morales, his hands trembling slightly, misread a sensor reading, causing a brief but alarming power surge. Ensign Williams, usually unflappable, snapped at a junior officer for a minor infraction. Then came the second message, this time directed at the entire crew but clearly aimed at Estelle. Crew of the Defiant, are you truly safe with a gamelan aboard? Can you trust someone who has been raised from birth to be your enemy? Remember, loyalty is a virtue, but only when it is earned. Whispers spread through the ship like a virus. Doubts, carefully planted by Zara, began to bloom in the minds of the crew. Glances filled with suspicion were cast in Estelle's direction. Tyler knew he had to do something. He couldn't let Zara erode their trust, their unity. He activated the ship-wide communication system. Zara, he said, his voice calm but firm. DRIS is Dr. Tyler Carter. I know your profile, I know your motivations. You're trying to divide us to exploit our fears, but you underestimate the human spirit. We are not easily broken. Zara's reply was immediate, her voice dripping with disdain. Dr. Carter, the failed mediator, the man who couldn't save his own crew. Do you really think you can play games with me? I know your weaknesses, Doctor. I know your guilt. Tyler flinched as if struck. He saw a flash of the past, the burning wreckage, the lifeless faces, the sound of his own screams echoing in the void. He hesitated. Just then the Defiant was caught in a powerful magnetic anomaly. The ship's systems flickered, then died. Emergency lights flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows across the bridge. We've lost power, Morales shouted. Shields are down, weapons offline. Zara seized the opportunity. Now, she barked. Full attack. Mara, her eyes blazing with defiance, slammed her fist on the console. Reroute power from auxiliary systems to weapons. Now we can't just sit here and die. But Captain, Morales protested, that will leave our defenses even more vulnerable. Do it, Mara roared. That's an order. The ship shuddered as Mara's order was executed. Power surged back to the weapons systems, but the shields remained dangerously weak. Zara's squadron unleashed a devastating barrage of energy weapons. Explosions rocked the Defiant, tearing gaping holes in its hull. Alarms blared, and the acrid smell of burning metal filled the air. Hull breach on decks 4 through 7. Williams screamed. We're taking heavy damage. Estelle, her face a mask of concentration, suddenly spoke, her voice urgent. Captain, Zara is not only tracking us, she is manipulating the magnetic field of the nebula. She is hurting us, anticipating our every move. This is a kill zone. The realization hit Tyler like a physical blow. They weren't just fighting Zara, they were fighting the nebula itself. Its strange electromagnetic properties, once a source of interference, were now being weaponized against them. As the Defiant faced imminent destruction, Tyler stared at the swirling chaos on the monitor. And then he saw it a pattern, a possibility. Captain, he said, his voice barely a whisper, the nebula, its electromagnetic field. We can use it. We can control it. Tyler's fingers danced across the console, his brow furrowed. We need to exploit the nebula's own electromagnetic fields, create a phantom echo, distort Zara's sensors, give her squadron false targets. Estelle tapped a series of commands into her own console. I've identified a specific frequency within Gamelin comms. Zara is likely using it to manipulate the magnetic fields within the nebula. Her fingers flew, lines of code cascading down the screen. It's elegant, efficient, and predictable. So we overload it, Tyler asked, his voice imbued with a nervous energy. Create a localized EMP. Theoretically, Estelle confirmed, her eyes still glued to the cascading data. Disable Zara's squadron. Temporarily, but the collateral effects on the nebula itself are unknown. Mara's voice crackled over the comms. Weaponizing the nebula, that's bold, Commander, but the Defiant won't take much of that. Modifying the emitters to generate that kind of electromagnetic pulse. It'll stress the shields to breaking point. Tyler chewed his lip. What about any life forms in the nebula? He asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. We don't know what's living in there. We could fry them. The memory of the Cerberus and the faces of the dead haunted him. Estelle ran another scan, her expression hardening. There's evidence of microscopic life forms, highly sensitive to electromagnetic fields. She looked up, her dark eyes meeting Tyler's. It adds a moral dimension, doesn't it? Tyler exhaled slowly. It does. He paused, then spoke with renewed determination. We minimize the range, focus the EMP specifically on Zara's squadron, which means we take the brunt of it. Mara's voice was tight. Confirmed. Rerouting power to the emitter array. Prepare for significant shield drain. The Defiant began emitting the modified signal. On the main view screen, the sensor readings of Zara's squadron flickered, then blurred, resolving into a chaotic jumble of false positives. Zara's voice, cold and precise, cut through the comm static. They're manipulating the nebula. Switch to manual targeting. Rely on visual confirmation. Now, Tyler shouted. Estelle initiated the EMP burst. A wave of shimmering energy pulsed from the Defiant, momentarily overloading Zara's squadron's sensors. Two of the fighters spun out of control, their engines sputtering. The Defiant's shields, however, buckled and groaned under the strain, the ship shuddering violently. Shields at 40%. Mara reported, her voice strained. Zara's fighter, modified with technology beyond the standard Gamelin issue, shuddered violently but quickly stabilized. Dampeners engaged, minimal damage sustained. Zara's voice was calm, too calm. She had anticipated this. He's predictable even with alien help. She knew. Estelle hissed, her fingers flying across the console. She prepared for this. She's using a counter frequency to dampen the EMP's impact. Zara adjusted her targeting solution. Focus fire on the emitter array. Disable their little toy. Incoming. Mara yelled. Estelle rerouted power, diverting it from life support and auxiliary systems. Shields to the emitter array. Brace for impact. The Defiant rocked violently as Zara's squadron unleashed a barrage of plasma fire. Life support flickered and died in sections 4 and 5. Hull breaches were reported on decks 2 and 6. Alarms blared. They're using our own EMP against us, Tyler realized, his voice tight with frustration. She's predicting our moves based on the initial power surge. Suddenly, Zara's voice, clear and mocking, filled the bridge. Tyler Carter, always trying to outsmart your superiors. It never works, does it? Your demise is imminent. Tyler gritted his teeth. She's right, Estelle, this isn't working. We need something more, a more complex pattern, something that truly disrupts her targeting systems. He looked at Estelle, a unwavering dedication in his eyes. We need to get deeper into the nebula, right into the heart of it. The Defiant, battered and bleeding, limped forward, drawn deeper into the swirling chaos of the nebula, pursued relentlessly by Zara's remaining fighters. Tyler studied the tactical displays, his brow furrowed. Zara's good, but she's predictable. Look at her engagement patterns. Every time she follows the same rigid doctrine. Flanking maneuvers, energy weapon barrages, always by the book. Estelle nodded, her fingers flying across the console. Gamelin military strategy emphasizes adherence to established protocols. Individuality is discouraged. She paused, her eyes narrowing. There's an area within the nebula. Section Gamma 9. The electromagnetic fields are highly unstable there. It's a blind spot for most sensors. A blind spot, Tyler repeated, a spark igniting in his eyes. We lure her in, use the Defiant as bait. Then we trigger a localized electromagnetic surge, disrupt her sensors, throw her squadron into chaos. It's risky, Estelle cautioned. The Defiant is already heavily damaged. Navigating those fields will be challenging. We don't have a choice, Tyler said grimly. It's the only way. The Defiant, scarred and battered, limped into the swirling chaos of Gamma 9. Sparks flew from damaged consoles and the ship groaned under the strain. On the bridge, the tension was palpable. Zara's squadron, like hunting dogs scenting blood, followed close behind, their energy cannons charged. They're taking the bait, Lieutenant Park announced, his voice tight. Zara's squadron is right on our tail. Tyler activated the comm system. Zara, this is Captain Tyler Carter of the Defiant. I urge you to reconsider your actions. There's no need for further bloodshed. We can find a peaceful resolution. Zara's voice crackled back, imbued with contempt. Your naivete is pathetic, human. You mistake weakness for honor. Prepare to be annihilated. Entering the blind spot now, Estelle announced, her hands steady on the controls. Initiating the electromagnetic surge. The nebula around them erupted in a riot of color and energy. The Defiant shuddered violently as the electromagnetic fields went haywire. On Zara's bridge, alarms blared as her sensors went dark. Fighters spun out of control, their pilots struggling to regain their bearings. Zara gripped the arms of her command chair, her face a mask of fury. What's happening? Report. Sensors are offline, Commander, a frantic voice shouted. We're losing control. Zara stared at the swirling chaos on her view screen, realization dawning in her eyes. It's a trap. They outmaneuvered us. On the Defiant, Tyler and Estelle worked in perfect synchronization. With Zara's shields weakened by the electromagnetic interference, they targeted her flagship, locking onto a vulnerable spot near the engine core. Firing, Tyler commanded. But before the Defiant's weapons could unleash their final barrage, Estelle's hand shot out, overriding the system. The firing sequence halted. Tyler stared at her, his expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Estelle, what are you doing? We have her. We do, Estelle said, her voice firm. But destroying Zara will solve nothing. She is a symbol of Gamelin rigidity, a product of a flawed system. If she dies here, she becomes a martyr. We must allow her to return home. She must be the one to create change within her empire. Tyler hesitated, then slowly nodded. He saw the logic in Estelle's words, the potential for a different kind of victory. Redirecting power to the engines, he said. Let's get her out of here. The Defiant altered its course, creating a window for Zara to escape the nebula. On Zara's bridge, the Gamelin commander watched in stunned silence as the Defiant pulled away. Why? Why are they letting us go? She murmured, her voice barely audible. I do not know, Commander, her first officer replied, but we should take advantage of this opportunity, prepare for immediate departure. Zara hesitated, her gaze fixed on the retreating Defiant. A flicker of something akin to respect crossed her face. Set a course for Gamelin Prime, she said, and log a full report of this encounter. I want to understand what just happened here. Emerging from the nebula, the Defiant, battered but unbowed, sailed into clearer space. The crew cheered, their voices hoarse with exhaustion and relief. Tyler leaned back in his command chair, a weary smile on his face. We did it, he said softly. We actually did it. He turned to Estelle, his eyes filled with gratitude. You were right, Estelle. Sometimes the greatest victories are the ones you don't win with weapons. Estelle returned his smile, her eyes shining with hope. Perhaps, she said, perhaps this is the beginning of something new. Tyler looked out at the vast expanse of space, a sense of peace settling over him. He had faced his demons, overcome his past failures, and found a new purpose in bridging the gap between species. He embraced his connection with Estelle, a bond forged in the crucible of conflict.